Hi, it's Sunday, August 18th, 2013, and welcome to another episode of the Atheist Experience. I am flying solo here today, at least for the first part of the show, as Tracie Harris. So I'll be handling, I guess, things as Russell's coming into the studio to sort of sit in for the second half of the show. Just to make a couple of quick announcements, we are going to be having dinner at Threadgill's after the program, and can't really say whether or not other people might want to attend that, but if you do want to attend, that's totally up to you. It's at 301 West Riverside Drive, downtown Austin. And also the only other couple things I've got is the Bat Cruise is still on for September 28th. That's a Saturday, and we will have a special guest speaker and attendance, and we're really hoping that to sell out on this particular cruise, so you might want to hurry up and get your tickets before those are gone. It's a fun event out on the river. And then we also have nonprofits that are back and live this week. It's my understanding on Wednesday they'll be doing a show, and you can check the website for more information on that. This is supposed to have Jeff, Russell, and Dennis on. And I guess I'll go ahead and start. I would normally, I guess, ask the person next to me, how are you today? And let them do a topic, but that's a little off kilter today. So I have a topic. I actually have a guest caller on who I'd like to go ahead and give a little bit of background. His name is Dr. Rob Poole. He is Professor of Social Psychiatry at Bangor University in North Wales. He is the co-director for the Center of Mental Health and Society in North Wales and honorary consultant psychiatrist at Wrexham Mailer Hospital, chair of the Royal College of Psychiatrists in Wales. Trained at St. George Hospital in London and Oxford. He's worked for many years in central Liverpool as a community psychiatrist. And he's published on a range of subjects, including a standard textbook on psychiatric interviewing with Robert Higo, and work on alcohol misuse, creativity, and mental illness, and also a range of other topics. He has another publication coming out later this year on mental health and poverty. He also notes that he's a third-generation atheist, and he says that he's never seen any point in arguing with the faithful. But he did manage somehow to stumble into a British debate about religion, spirituality, and professional boundaries in psychiatry, and he's now published a fair bit on the subject. And he's argued with George Carey, who is a former Archbishop of Canterbury, in a debate, official debate, and there was no vote, but in Rob's opinion, he won. So I'm going to go ahead and put him on, and we're going to have a little conversation about some of what he's been involved in, which focuses on the topic of prayer in therapy. So let me just go ahead and, Rob, are you on the line?
Yeah, hi Tracie.
Hi. I really appreciate you coming on tonight. I know it's a little bit late for you.
It's not quite past my bedtime yet.
Okay, well, good. And so let me just give a little quick background on how I got in touch with you. I was actually doing some research for a podcast on godless bitches, and I was looking into pharmacists' refusal to fill prescriptions based on religious objections, and I found a paper that you had posted, or that was posted that you had written, that you described as a written version of your, I guess, presentation in the debate with the Archbishop. And I contacted you about that issue, but then as we started corresponding, I became aware of another issue that you were involved in specifically that had to do with the Royal College of Psychiatrists, which is the professional association for psychiatry in the UK. And you were involved in publishing a debate that was ongoing with, I guess, the then chair of the Spirituality and Psychiatry Special Interest Group at the college, Chris Cook, who took the, I guess, the against position on, I forget exactly how it was expressed, but that prayer and therapy probably shouldn't happen. And you took the for, that you didn't think it should be happening in the therapy setting. Would you like to go ahead and give a little background on your history with this?
Yeah, as you say, I'm a third-generation atheist, but I've never really thought that made much difference as far as my practice of psychiatry was concerned. It's always seemed to me that you accept patients as they come, and you shouldn't really impose your personal beliefs upon them. You should stick with really what's scientifically sustainable. And but I was quite discomforted from about 1999 that there was this very large group formed within the Royal College of Psychiatrists called the Spirituality and Psychiatry Special Interest Group, which was devoted to studying the interface between the two, and it was okay. I mean, it seemed an odd thing to have within a sort of scientific profession, but nonetheless, that's fine. You know, they weren't doing anything that I really felt particularly concerned about. Things really came to a head when the college has a house journal, which is available in libraries across the world, but it's called The Psychiatrist now. It used to be called the Psychiatric Bulletin, and they had an invited editorial by a guy called Harold Koenig. Harold Koenig is a psychiatrist who works at Duke University, which I think is North Carolina. Mm-hmm. And he's published an enormous amount about religion and spirituality and medicine in general, and he's published what is, if you like this kind of stuff, a standard textbook. And he did this invited editorial, and it said a number of things that I thought were really quite disturbing. It said, for example, that every patient should have a spiritual history taken from them, whether they wanted to have one taken or not. Now, you've got to bear in mind things are very different in the UK to the United States. Some estimates of the number of people who have no faith at all in this country vary from about 25% to about 50%. So, you know, insisting on taking a spiritual history from everybody is a kind of funny thing. It said that psychiatrists should be prepared to support healthy religious beliefs and challenge unhealthy ones, which I felt, well, who decides? And finally, it said that under certain circumstances it was permissible to pray with patients. At which point, I have to say my personal reaction was, whoa, hang on a minute.
Sure.
So I kind of checked out how some of my colleagues felt about this. I spoke to a number of people I work with who, some of whom had a religious faith and some of whom didn't, and pretty much all my friends agreed with me, and I don't think I'd intimidated them into that. I think they genuinely agreed, and so we wrote a letter to the as it was, Psychiatric Bulletin, saying this is out of order, and after that, all hell broke loose.
Yes, it did.
I should say, for completeness, the thing that really gave this article by Koenig a bit of a twist was that there was a invited commentary that supported what was said, written by the then president of the Royal College of Psychiatrists, who is someone with a strong religious faith, and I felt that made it seem as if it was Royal College of Psychiatrists policy. So it's been a kind of an escalation over the years, but it was really that thing in 2008 that got us going.
Now, wasn't it there one point where Prince Charles was actually dragged into this somehow?
Oh, I dragged Prince Charles into it.
Okay.
I have to say, we're not personally acquainted, but I did drag him into it. Well, there's a kind of a side plot, because I don't know how much people know about Prince Charles. He is going to be the next monarch, apparently, in this country. And Prince Charles is a strong believer in various alternative therapies, kind of alternative religious practices and so forth. And back in 1991, I think it was 1991, he became the patron of the Royal College of Psychiatrists. I don't know why he did that, because he proceeded, when they first made him patron, he spoke to the annual conference and really said that we should all be embracing alternative therapies and a variety of other things. Basically the assembled group of psychiatrists looked on in horror as he told us that we should be really sort of tree-hugging, I suppose. But Prince Charles has kind of continued, despite the fact he's in this position of patronage of our college, has promoted various alternative therapies, and in fact, he manufactures, his company manufactures herbal remedies, which at one point had to be taken off the market because they broke the law as far as false claims was concerned for efficacy.
Problems. Sure.
And yet he has promulgated this idea that somehow we should be bringing religion closer with psychiatry. So Prince Charles is over in the corner there.
Okay. But I didn't mean to drag you off course. So please go on with what was happening here. Because now, it's my understanding, you had directed me to a debate that was published in the British Journal of Psychiatry, and I remember going and reading that and being frustrated, I guess, with the responses to some of the challenges that you were bringing up, because I felt like they weren't being directly addressed, and I felt that part of the weakness in the responses to you is that you actually, you don't have the opinion that a person who might benefit from a prayer group or from some sort of spiritual framework or religious framework in their therapy should be denied that. It's simply that your position is that it should be provided by a religious framework and not in
That's
psychiatry.
absolutely right. I think if you want religion, you choose the person of a religious denomination of your choice, and you go and speak to them.
Right.
It seems to me that getting that from your psychiatrist or from your therapist is entirely wrong. Psychiatry is underpinned by applied science. It's not a perfect science. Religion is a matter of faith. They're completely different things, and they shouldn't be mixed. In terms of what happened, well, what happened was, firstly, it was interesting because I think it's fair to say that the spirituality and psychiatry group are quite a broad church, so to speak. There's quite a variety of opinion within it. But many of the people within it who wrote against me, because there's been correspondence going backwards and forwards and so forth, tried to suggest that I was suggesting that psychiatrists should never mention anything about religion. Well, that isn't true at all. I mean, people who are with serious mental illnesses often are very troubled by religious ideas, and you have to engage with them. It's doing religion.
Right.
It's actually doing religion as part of a therapy that I think is completely beyond the professional boundary. So we ended up, anyway, the debate that was published in the British Journal of Psychiatry, it's 2 years ago now. This is something that's done quite regularly by the British Journal of Psychiatry. They have a debate article. So Chris Cook, who is actually still the chairman of the Spirituality and Psychiatry Special Interest Group, and I batted backwards and forwards as to whether prayer was acceptable within the context of standard psychiatric practice. I'd have to agree with you. I mean, of course, just like I believe I won the debate with George Carey, I believe I won the debate with Chris Cook as well. You see a pattern developing, which may not be entirely related to my rhetorical skills so much as my vanity, but still.
Right.
I felt it was quite difficult to actually pin him down. Chris Cook is actually someone I know very well. He's a nice guy. I went to medical school with him, actually. He's a professor of psychiatry, and he's also an ordained Anglican minister. Oh, actually ordained by George Carey, as it turned out. Okay. But he was very difficult to pin him down. So, I mean, one of the points he made, which I really felt kind of illustrated a failure on the other side to engage with the real issues, was, well, what about if I pray without speaking? Does that count? And it just seems to me to be a kind of a reductio ad absurdum type argument. Where if you pray and someone doesn't know you're doing it, that's fine.
Well, I liked, if I can interrupt for a minute, I really liked your retort to that, which was it's no different than engaging in a sexual relationship with a patient would be inappropriate, but you might not be able to stop yourself thinking about it.
Exactly.
So you were like, as a human being and just being human, I might have thoughts about a patient, but if I act on that, that's when I've breached the ethical protocols.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So to me, it's relatively straightforward. Now, I have to say that I think I'm coming from a place that's quite different from the atheist experience, because it isn't that I'm actually arguing against religion. My position is let's be tolerant. Let's respect diversity and not try and thrust our own beliefs down other people's throats. But I mean, one of the difficulties is that the other side of the debate, so Chris and George Carey, actually, George Carey, I never really expected to speak in any way, shape or form to a former Archbishop of Canterbury, but George Carey said to me, well, he said, Rob, I've wanted to meet you for ages, which kind of slightly spooked me. And he said that I have to say I agree with nearly everything you said. To which I had to say, no, you don't agree with me. I mean, it's nice of you to say so, but you really don't agree with me. So there's this kind of argument that spirituality is a universal human experience, and that it subsumes all types of meaning and aesthetic appreciation, which, as an atheist, is a position I really object to. I mean, one of the things, speaking as myself now, not as a psychiatrist, but I always get quite cross at the idea that somehow the only way of finding meaning in life is in some way spiritual, or, which means to me, supernatural.
Well, I'd like to just insert that I even saw in some of the reading that I was doing, and I was reading a lot last night, some of the reading I was doing, somebody mentioned something about some atheists. They actually phrased it that way. Some atheists, don't consider themselves spiritual. And the thing that made me kind of chuckle about that is that when I was a fundamentalist Christian, I didn't consider myself spiritual. And I know for a fact that there are theists who do not consider themselves spiritual and who are offended by that suggestion. Because you had mentioned in the debate that the Anglican tradition is more liberal and broad, whereas there are other traditions, and I think you actually were going outside of Christianity, but I'm going to say that within Christianity, there are other positions that are more tied to doctrinal correctness, and they are offended at the idea of this liberal Christian ideology because they feel it is a complete error and an offensive error. So it's not just atheists who have a problem with being labeled as spiritual. There are theists who have a problem with this.
Well, Chris Cook, in one of his articles that's nothing to do with me, in fact, he's written a book. He's also written a book about it, which incidentally, he edited a book about religion and psychiatry, which was published by the Royal College of Psychiatrists. Says, well, it's better to speak about spirituality because it's a less loaded term than religion. Which kind of, to me, kind of nails it.
And yet the problem is, when they're trying to pray in practice, that's not spirituality, that is religious exercise.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Although I'm not quite sure what spirituality means. I mean...
Well, they defined it as including or encompassing religion, but they're doing this bait and switch where they're selling this sort of overarching concept of this ethereal, ill-defined spirituality, and they have a section on their little website that I linked on the blog that says, what is spirituality? And if you read it and you still don't know, then you're in the same boat I am. Because I read that section and I still don't know. And but they have this idea that, we'll use spirituality and pull away from religion because we don't want to get specific and exclusive, and so we'll use spirituality, but then prayer and therapy is religious practice. It's not separate from religion in some kind of overarching way. It is religion, straightforward.
Well, absolutely, and it's interesting. I mean, because I've ended up... despite the fact I've always believed that there's no point in arguing with the faithful because it's just not about logic, I've ended up having lots and lots of discussions with people about it, and I'm quite a good friend actually of our hospital chaplain, and it was a very sensible person, very sensible woman, but people will not, people from the religious side of this debate will not reject the possibility of praying with patients in the course of treatment, even whilst acknowledging that it's fraught with dangers.
Yeah, that's what I guess got to me the most, was the insistence that somehow they are glued to this idea that the psychiatrist has to be the one that prays. And they acknowledge that it's one more area that could introduce ethical boundary problems. And yet when somebody offers a solution, which is there's already prayer groups and clerics and religious organizations that you could just find out what your patient is geared toward and recommend them to the local pastor that services that brand of Christianity or that brand of Islam or that brand of whatever they believe, send them somewhere where they would feel more affiliated and where the group already exists to do this and where they're asking to do it. It's outside your practice. It's not you doing it. You're not lending some kind of authoritarian legitimacy to their religion by doing it. And I think I sent in a letter to the Journal, and one of the questions I had was, how in the world do you implement this without stepping on somebody's religious freedom? Because you're going to have psychiatrists who have their own faith traditions that are going to then what? Have to offer prayer to their patients who might be of another tradition? I mean,
Well, quite.
it's a mess. And then you've got the patients, and it's like the patient's going to pray with the doctor, and they're all in sync, and then suddenly the doctor says something that's not quite what the patient agrees with, and now what just happened? And I couldn't see.
In fact, there's even a problem where the psychiatrist and the patient share a faith. So, and it's an example I've used in one of the things I've published about this, which is the situation where you've got someone who's severely depressed. Someone who's severely depressed, and say they ask the psychiatrist to pray with them for deliverance, and their prayer isn't answered. I would suggest there's a predictable consequence that people will feel more despairing as a consequence.
Sure.
That their sense of abandonment is likely to be heightened by the fact that the person who's trying to treat them for the depression has prayed with them and that has failed. Where does it leave one's confidence in, if you like, science-based treatments when the prayer bit has failed, which the doctor obviously has got faith in? So I think there's real pitfalls in this.
Okay, hang on just a minute. I have a host that's joined me later in the program. This is Russell Glasser, who is now here.
Hi, Rob. I'm sorry I wasn't here earlier, but there was some mix-up communication on my end. So, hi, I'm Russell.
Hi.
And I've been listening in for about 10 minutes, and I just wanted to interject something, which is that it seems to me that part of the effect of letting psychiatrists pray for the patients as in part of their official capacity is that they lend sort of an air of legitimacy to it. I was recently in a discussion with a close friend of mine who I won't mention in particular, but this friend was talking about going to a chiropractor, and it was news to her that chiropractomancy isn't considered like mainstream medicine. And she pointed out, well, insurance companies cover it, so why would they do that if it's not legitimate medicine? And I looked it up, and they do, and they say, well, it has some therapeutic value like massage, but it's still not medicine. But the effect of this was to kind of muddy the waters, to sort of
legitimize it.
To legitimize it, to give the impression that it's real science of some sort. And I feel like this would be much worse if a practicing psychiatrist who has a degree, a medical license, would do this in their official capacity, right?
Well, I'd agree with that, although I think the evidence is that this stuff is fairly common in the US, in fact. Because as far as we have much evidence about them, there is an evidence gap which we're trying to do something about.
Yeah, how much would you like us to apologize for what happens in the US?
Well, I wouldn't get you to start with the psychiatrist praying with the patient.
Okay.
But anyway, I think it's reasonably common. There's an interesting comparison with the US and the UK. In the UK, I don't know, but I wouldn't be at all surprised to find that psychiatrists, by and large, are more religious than the general population. We know that the situation is reversed in the US. And it's actually a minority of psychiatrists who have a religious faith in America. Mm-hmm. But nonetheless, even back 20 years ago, an American psychiatrist did a survey of, there was some associate, within the American Psychiatric Association, there was a Christian group, and he surveyed them, and one of the things, that a third of them said that they would be prepared to counsel non-believers on issues such as sex outside of marriage, abortion, and so forth, on the basis of their religious faith that wasn't shared by the patient. So, I think certainly 20 years ago, this would have been regarded as seriously out of order in the UK. So there's a difference in practice, and it is a complicated one.
Yeah, I mean, just from my own experience, I would be completely stunned and taken aback if I went into any kind of professional therapist's office, not just a psychiatrist, and they mentioned or approached me about religion when I hadn't brought it up. I would find that to be extremely weird. My husband, who I've mentioned briefly on a few occasions on the show, is a theist. And when I brought this up to him when you and I first started corresponding, he said that he would walk right out of a therapist's office if they started talking about prayer and therapy.
Well, the interesting thing is that no one's really bothered to ask the patients about this much. What they ask people is, would you like your religion taken into account in your treatment? And they say yes, and
Sure.
of course you would. Take it into account. When you actually ask people about whether you want the psychiatrist to pray with you, people tend to react with that same kind of horror.
Hey, it is horrifying.
No, when we said taken into account, we meant would you like us to say voodoo spells instead of operating on you?
Well, again, there's a guy, a psychiatrist called Richard Sloan, who's written the standard book about religion and medicine. He happens to be a psychiatrist who working in New York. He apparently, according to his book, it's quite common for American surgeons to pray with patients in the anaesthetic room, which I have to say wouldn't give me great faith in their confidence in the surgery, but I don't know.
We do get letters from people describing things like that because of our work with TAE. So people write to the show and they'll say, something like this happened to me. But I will say that, they write to us because they're stunned that it happened. So I do think that this is still kind of a shocking thing even in the U.S. I wouldn't expect, my husband had a bout with cancer that went on for a lot of years. We had a lot of meetings with surgeons, all kinds of doctors. Nobody prayed with us. Nobody asked us to pray. No nurses, nobody that worked in the clinics. No one ever suggested such a thing, and I would consider it completely unprofessional. And we never ran into that. But we do get letters, again, at TAE from people who say that they did encounter things like this in their doctor's office.
Well, we've been running some field trials of some research where we've been meeting with groups of people and putting little vignettes about, this is research actually I'm doing with Chris Cook. Mm-hmm. So Chris Cook and I are doing this research together. And we've got these vignettes and we put them to people, and it's interesting that you get quite varied responses to various vignettes, but the praying with people one people tend to see it as definitely out of order, or even the suggestion of it actually.
Yeah, and I just, like I said, I just keep coming back to the idea that if they want to pray, nobody's telling them they can't pray, and nobody would deny them help in getting a prayer group to, or a cleric or somebody who could help them. I mean, the idea of just referring them to someone that can help them with that, I think, is perfect, because it just, you're not getting involved with it. You're still practicing what you're trained to practice. And the cleric does his thing and helps the person who says that they are affiliated with this or that religious tradition, and they go there and get whatever support they need from that. I mean, it just seems like such a reasonable solution to a problem or to something that could be just fraught with issues.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes there can be complications, but it works. Like in my many years working in central Liverpool, where it was a very, very diverse population, I worked with the local imam, with local priests, in fact with staff from both cathedrals, and it wasn't a problem.
Right.
And they did their stuff and I did mine. Right. And interestingly, none of the clergy I've ever worked with have ever felt any need to work on the antidepressant treatment or give advice to their what you call them, congregations about psychiatric treatment. So I don't see where's the difficulty. If they don't want to do that, I don't want to do the other bit really.
Right. No, I think it makes perfect sense. I can't imagine. That's what makes me wonder what the objection is. I mean, I cannot put my finger on what the objection is to simply referring the person.
I think one of the things that is striking is that this has become increasingly prominent as a kind of a cause célèbre, as the Church of England has found itself in a weaker and weaker position. And one of the interesting things about George Carey, who is now, he wasn't we've had two, we're on our second Archbishop of Canterbury since George Carey left, but George Carey has been a vociferous proponent of having a distinctive Christian culture in this country, He's kind of opposed to diversity, and I think that's kind of an indication of, if you like, established Christianity losing its grip on British national life. I think that's part of why we see this. I think that isn't the only bit. I think that no doubt there's been a big fuss in America about DSM-5. There's been a big fuss here about DSM-5. People tend to see DSM-5. I mean, I have to say, I think DSM-5 is a disaster.
Can I stop you for a minute? Could you please, for our viewers, explain what the manual is?
Oh, right, okay. So this is the American Psychiatric Association's Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, sorry, 5th edition. And it's essentially grossly expanded the number of disorders that you might suffer from. It's actually quite difficult not to have a mental disorder if you read DSM-5. You're quite likely to end up with 5 or 6 if you read it, which is okay. I mean, well, it's not okay at all, actually. But one of the things that has driven criticism of DSM-5 has been the argument that psychiatry has become very, very decontextualized, lacking in a psychological or social element, very much about medications and illnesses. Now, I think it's a widespread perception that this has happened in psychiatry, and I think that there is a part of this that is an attempt to reclaim meaning. However, in the UK, I'm not sure that we've gone quite as far down the biological path that people have gone down in America. So, for example, as a mainstream psychiatrist, I've got lots of psychotherapy training. I had to do it in order to qualify as a psychiatrist. I do psychotherapy with people, but nonetheless, there's this perception that we've lost a grip on meaning, and then there's kind of almost a knee-jerk thing that says, well, meaning means spirituality, and then you're off down this path, really. So I think there's more than one thread, or more than one pressure that's making people think that this is a good idea, but it's not.
And so ultimately, I guess where this has ended up is that the research that you were talking about with you and Chris Cook being involved, the Royal College has decided to sort of table this until there's more information? Is that kind of a...
No, not at all.
No, okay.
No. The Royal College, a position paper was written that went through the machinery of the Royal College. Essentially, it's a bit of an anodyne paper because it got kind of edited by numerous committees, but it does say that spirituality should be taken into account. It's very unclear what this means, and that went through after all this started. I have to say, no one asked me, but I'm not entirely surprised by that. So I kicked up a bit of a fuss about the fact that this had seemed to have gone through without reference to the concerns that have been expressed. And so I made this proposal that Chris and I should do some research together, which, no one's neutral about religion. So the alternative is to have a balanced leadership of the research. And that's got the support of the Royal College, and I have to say we've got some interest from our General Medical Council, which is the body that licenses doctors in the UK. It takes a long time to do this stuff. We're developing the methods, but at least we've got a chance of developing some empirical data about it in the long run.
Okay, and I had one other question. Now, you had, as part of your work previously, you were involved in investigating, I guess, ethical questions or complaints about practices in other psychiatrists. Is that correct?
That's something I do to now, yes.
Okay, and you said that at one point you had more complaints about religious breaches of boundaries than sexual breaches of boundaries. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's true. I've come across that more frequently. Now, you may say, well, I would, because I've got an issue about it, but the fact is that in my personal experience, it's been much more common that people have complained about
right. I mean,
this
wasn't just you doing investigations like the Inquisition. This was complaints being brought forward, correct?
No, these are things that have got to the point where someone had made a formal complaint to one body or another.
Sure, and you're just simply saying that the number of complaints you got regarding the religious breaches were pretty numerous compared to some other things.
Well, the sexual ones were very few and far between.
Okay.
I mean, very few and far between. But the religious ones were rather more common.
Okay. Yeah, and I remember one, just to mention real quickly, there was one that you wrote up where a particular doctor had started taking referrals from a local church, I guess, or a local cleric instead of through the proper channels or the normal channels. He was like taking a lot of referrals, and one of those referrals he agreed to only treat this patient if their spouse was in the room.
That's correct.
And it turned out that their spouse was abusing them, and the patient couldn't speak to the doctor because the spouse was present in the therapy.
That's correct.
And they were unsuccessfully treated for depression for a great long time until ultimately someone found out there was a greater problem, and they switched doctors to a doctor that wasn't tied to that faith, and he then found out that there was some major abuse happening in the relationship.
Yeah, all that happened. Although I have to say that was some years ago, but
Sure.
Some long time ago. But yeah, that did happen. Yeah.
But I just want to point out the problems that are encountered here, and you've had other problems where the patients prayed with their doctors, and then afterwards the patient was like, maybe I shouldn't have done that, and then they felt uncomfortable.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, so you couldn't really leave it to a patient to say they're okay with this, because this is a person seeking help, and this is an authority, and after the fact they may say, I regret that, and it was a bad decision, and yet that's where the doctor is supposed to step up and say this might not be a good idea.
Well, you see, people have all kinds of ideas about things that might be helpful when they're mentally ill, or
Sure.
when they're just feeling very distressed. So, you might feel that taking very large amounts of diazepam is a good idea.
Right.
But it isn't. Right. And so you have to say no.
Sure.
And there are many examples like that. And I personally, I think getting involved with the doctor in religious practice would be one of them.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, we do have some calls on. We're going to have to, I think, cut you loose at this point. But I wanted to thank you so much for calling in and bringing this matter to our attention, and also for being willing to discuss this publicly. I just very much appreciate your time.
It's absolutely fine. Really nice speaking to you.
All
Thanks
right.
for joining us, Rob.
Thank you.
That's great.
All right.
Bye now.
Bye-bye.
All right, my turn.
Okay, go. Yeah, I've hogged up the first.
And sorry again for being late.
No problem.
Did you mention where Matt is? He's
I
in a
didn't.
New Orleans conference this week. I don't know what one.
Okay.
Anyway, we have John in Chicago.
Hi, Russell, Tracy. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Hey, how's it going?
Good.
Fine, thanks.
Good. Yeah, I called about a month ago, man, and I was hoping to get Matt to continue our discussion.
Sorry to disappoint you.
What's that?
Sorry to disappoint you.
Oh, well, no problem. That was an interesting discussion with Dr. Poole.
Dr. Poole. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was really interesting. He said that he doesn't use his position to force his beliefs down his patients' throats, which I commend him for, because that's a position that he really could abuse his power. And whether it's a religious psychiatrist, a theist psychiatrist, or an atheist psychiatrist, both of them should respect the patient, and I commend him for that.
I
Absolutely.
totally agree with
Yeah,
that. I mean, I
absolutely,
think
yes.
a person in a position of power should not be in the business of pushing religious belief on the people they're in power over, and that is true whether it's a psychiatrist and a patient, or a teacher and a student, or a military commander and their underlings.
Very, very true. I agree. I commend him for that. But I actually had a question for him. I'm sad you let him go. I was going to pick his brain about a couple things. But
One of the reasons we let him go was because there were no on-topic calls.
Yeah, I kind of had a different topic, but I was so interested in the call that I had a couple questions pop
Well,
up.
why don't you throw it out there, and maybe I can post an answer at the blog if I can get him to answer you.
Sure. I was going to ask him, personally, prayer works for me. I do believe in a creator, and I've had a lot of hardships in my life, and it wasn't until I found prayer that I really found myself. And I don't consider myself delusional in the least bit, so I was going to ask him, in his professional opinion, his clinical opinion, what is wrong with prayer and what is wrong with the belief in a creator from a
I imagine if he were still on the line,
No, he wouldn't think there was a problem with that. I mean, unless it was causing you a problem, he would say this is totally your call. I mean,
well, you both said, I'm sorry.
Yeah, he wouldn't interfere with that, and if you wanted, so if you went to his practice and you said, I really appreciate what you're doing to me as a psychiatrist, like your help with me as far as the psychotherapy and as far as the drugs or whatever you might be using in his psychiatric practice. If you were to say, I really benefit from prayer and I would like some prayer support, he would refer you for prayer support. And that's what he was saying, that when he worked in underprivileged areas, one of the things he did was refer people to different religious, traditions based on what they were affiliated with. He went ahead and sent them to people in the community that could help them with that. So he's totally for, if it helps you and it's not, causing a problem or contributing to your problem and you find it helpful, he would refer you to somebody that could support you in that.
Right. Yeah, that's cool.
Although I was wondering, when you say prayer works, are you basically just saying, it makes you feel happy, cheers you up, takes your mind off your problems?
Well, I think he's saying he feels supported by it. Is that right, John?
I do, and I do feel that it helps because I do believe that it's direct communication with our Creator. I think that people abuse prayer when they say, well, God, give me this, give me that, for petty things, things that aren't really morally driven. Like I asked for him to open my mind and stuff, to possibilities.
No, I understand.
I don't ask him for get me out of this situation. I don't ask for that.
I understand. All right, but you have a question about
DNA. I just wanted to say where we would disagree with you on that is obviously we would say that prayer has no more or less psychological effect than meditation, or I like to play video games to unwind. I mean, anything that you can do to enjoy yourself and improve your mental state is going to improve your overall health. And where we would disagree is that God is doing stuff for you.
Right. I don't think that's what prayer is. I don't think God reaches down and personally, answers your beck and call. But I think that if you open yourself up, it's possible. But that's just my belief. But my question for the doctor was, he said that he doesn't believe in prayer. And Tracie was like, well, I'd be horrified if somebody asked me to pray with them. So my question is, what is so horrifying about that idea?
Because if I'm in the doctor's office, that's outside of their purview of their professional boundary. They have no business integrating that into, if I go to a physician, for example, like a surgeon, I didn't go there to have some sort of a religious integrated thing with that person. I went there for a surgery. He does surgery. He does not do prayer. He doesn't do religion. And that's what Dr. Poole is talking about, is those boundaries, those professional boundaries. It's like if I felt like I might be helped by a massage, I wouldn't expect my surgeon to administer it. Now, if I were at a therapist's office and he felt like maybe some stress relief type things would be helpful, don't you think it would be kind of weird if he said, would you like me to give you a neck rub? As opposed to saying, well, why don't we find somebody that can do a massage for you?
I think maybe what might be clearer to John, I mean, we were talking earlier about people in power being in a position of pushing their religious beliefs on people. What would you think, I mean, when you say, let me pray with you, when the doctor says, let me pray with you, they're promoting a specific point of view. Suppose that you went to a surgeon and he said to you, let's pray to Allah and face toward Mecca because the Lord Muhammad is going to heal you. Wouldn't that bug you a little bit?
What about when they give clinical diagnoses and prescribe medicines?
Well, that's
promoting a particular point of view.
Well, no, you went to them for that. I mean, that's their specialty. That's what they do. That's the point. Prayer is not what they do. Surgery is what they do. Mental health care within the boundaries of, like he's saying, this is a science-based approach. They are qualified in a certain type of treatment that is not religion.
But he did admit that it isn't their proof. He did say that.
He didn't say that his treatments are perfect. What he said is that he is not a religious provider. That's not what he does.
Right, I understand that. But in
Right.
contrast, it's like if someone comes to him and says, well, I'm depressed,
Right?
he can choose to say, well, I think that this medicine, antidepressant, might help you.
Right.
Or he could choose to say, well, let's try different therapy other than medicine. So it
Only
is
if
kind
that
of
therapy
promoting
is within the professional bounds of what he is qualified and trained to do. He cannot offer something
would
outside
you
of
be
that.
okay with a doctor just deciding to say a Muslim prayer over you? Or
No, no.
sacrifice something?
It's irrelevant. It's one of the things that Poole was talking about. I mean, let's say that I went to a psychiatrist and I said, I think I would benefit by having sex with you, doctor. I mean, shouldn't he tell me no? Don't you
Yeah,
agree that he should say no to that? And so the idea is the doctor has to have boundaries of things that he does do and things he doesn't do and things he will provide and things he won't provide. And it wouldn't matter if he thought that, you know, a sexual encounter might be helpful to me. He's not the one to provide that. He has a boundary as a professional healthcare provider that does not go into practicing religion. It does not go into sexual behavior. It does not go into inappropriate touching. One of the things that they talked about was a psychiatrist, for example, may in certain instances be perfectly within his boundaries to do a rectal exam. If you tried to do that to somebody socially, that would be horribly inappropriate, right, to just do that in a social setting. But in a social setting, you can give hugs and kisses. But in that psychiatrist's office, that is a breach of boundary. So he can't hug and kiss his patient, but he can digitally examine their rectum. So, I mean, you have to look at the idea of what is and is not appropriate within the context of what they practice. It's not about, well, prayer is common or hugging is common. He's not allowed to do that. He can't violate those boundaries.
Well, I'm not disputing that on the grounds of professionalism. Like, I agree. If a patient comes to him and says, will you pray with me, and he doesn't feel comfortable with that and that's outside of his realm of science, I don't see anything wrong with that. But my question was, why does he feel that his view of the way patients should be treated is in some way superior to that of alternative view?
Well, no, he didn't say it was superior to an alternative view. He said, this is what I do, this is what I'm qualified to do. Outside of it, that's not what my profession is. Actually are boundaries to what he should and shouldn't do. So, for example, there's something called the General Medical Council guidance on boundaries and ethics, and one of those is you should not normally discuss your personal beliefs with patients unless those beliefs are directly relevant to the patient's care. You must not impose your beliefs on patients or cause distress by the inappropriate or insensitive expression of religious, political, or other beliefs or views. Equally, you must not put pressure on patients to discuss or justify their beliefs or the absence of them. So in his profession, there's boundaries that he is expected to adhere to. And some of those boundaries have to do with you don't talk about your beliefs with your patient. And if you ask a doctor to pray with you, what if that doctor is a different religion? What if they pray with you and then suddenly afterwards you're like, I feel compromised by this? And he gives an example of one patient that did bring forward a complaint who did ask a doctor to pray with him. The doctor agreed to it. They prayed together, and then afterward the patient regretted it and felt uncomfortable seeing the doctor anymore. The doctor should not have done that just because the patient asked for it. They're mentally ill.
Yeah, I agree with that. The professionalism should be upheld. But, I was more concerned with his personal opinion on it. Why does he feel? And, I'd like to ask you, what is your quarrel with alternative means and, theism in general? Why are you an atheist?
Because I'm not convinced that a God exists.
Well, couldn't you be agnostic about it?
You could be agnostic atheist. You could be agnostic theist. You could say, I don't know if there's a God or not, but I believe there is one. Or you could say, I don't know if there's a God or not, I don't believe there is one. I just haven't seen compelling evidence, so I don't believe in it. If somebody says, is it possible? I don't know. I don't know if it's possible or not. I don't even know how I would assess that.
Well, it's like atheism these days. You guys hold conferences. You guys have your own shows.
Sure.
It's kind of like a religion in itself, the way you guys practice it and promote it.
Well, what does religion mean to you?
To me, organized religion is a group of people with the same set of beliefs who...
Well, we already fail because
together.
atheism doesn't have a set of beliefs.
So, but a political party would be a religion then?
No, I think
like
religious
a
beliefs pertain
football
to the
fan
origin of
club?
life, and I think religious beliefs rather refer to the origin of life and that kind of thing, not political affiliations.
Right. Well, normally religious beliefs refer to supernatural origins of life. But I mean, if you want to define the word religion so broadly that it just means a group of people getting together and agreeing on stuff, then at some point I could just say, okay, we're a religion. So what?
We're agreeing on the nature, cause, and purpose of the universe. You guys believe...
Well, we don't.
I couldn't say you guys, but atheists in general believe that there was no creator, that everything's natural.
But that doesn't mean that they agree on how it was created. I mean, we have a physicist in our audience who disagrees with Big Bang. So, I mean, I don't think, and I have no idea how the universe came to be. I'm completely clueless. I would be the worst physics student in the world, and so I am completely unable to
Don't
have.
sell yourself so short.
Well, I would be
Tracie.
unable to have an informed enough opinion to actually put forward, my defense of the justification for the production of the universe. I mean, that's way beyond my
Are you an
ken.
evolutionist?
Huh?
Are you guys evolutionists?
Well, if you're asking me, do I think evolution occurs? Yes.
Do you believe humans evolved from some kind of chimp?
I think currently that's pretty much the best model out there.
So yes.
So the intelligent design model doesn't even
Well,
cross your mind?
The intelligent design model doesn't even rise to a scientific hypothesis.
Yeah, I mean, the thing
it's
is-
been pretty thoroughly discredited when it tried to enter the scientific sphere. So it's basically the same set of religious superstitions as creationism.
I guess my point too,
I
though,
don't
is
think so. It's got peer-reviewed articles in work right now. So
Yeah, they create their own journals that are outside of mainstream peer-reviewed journals and basically pat each other on the back.
Journals. Stephen Meyer, author of Signature in the Self, he's published peer-reviewed work advocating intelligent design. So it is scientific. It just seems like you guys would rather the other explanation rather than that one.
no, I mean, he published some stuff too, and he was a big proponent of irreducible complexity, and the university that he works for has published a big disclaimer at his page saying we don't accept this as science. I mean,
Is there a reason why they don't?
yeah, because it got shredded by the peers in the peer review. I
Can you
mean,
be
peer
specific?
review.
I mean, can you say how?
Well,
Or is it
if
just
you
a
wanna-
matter
if-
that
if
all
you'd
it
like-
has?
Yeah, I have read Behe's book, as a matter of fact. He
Well,
makes a whole
You have a
lot of
reputation?
unsupported... What?
Behe, B-E-H-E. It's B-E-H-E, Michael Behe. And if you go to YouTube, there's actually a good NOVA presentation on intelligent design on trial. That was a NOVA program.
I've seen that, but
Yeah.
I'm asking like...
Behe was the main scientist who testified on behalf of intelligent design. So he was the one that was being discussed in that particular program.
Right, but intelligent design as a science wasn't on trials. The implications of
Right,
religion
because
within it.
intelligent design,
Well-
by and large, is not taken seriously by almost any scientist. There
But
are
they-
a handful
Right.
who
Well, that's not a valid argument.
who accept it for basically religious reasons, but it has not penetrated. And the fact that like a handful of papers out of hundreds of thousands that are published every year are trying to promote intelligent design in no way makes that part of mainstream science.
Well, the
So
thing
are you saying popular opinion makes it untrue?
No.
No.
The peer
Well,
review,
that's basically what you're saying.
no, it's not. That's not what he's saying. The peer review
You
has...
said more people believe this than that, so therefore...
He's talking
we don't have
about
to pay
people who
attention
are
to it.
qualified to have a professional opinion on the biological data. So these aren't just people, right? He's not making an argument from popularity where it's like, well, more people think this than that. He's saying that the people who are actually expert in this field, who actually understand this data and know how to best interpret it, are rejecting this idea and accepting another one. And that
But there are
matters.
millions who don't reject it and who do accept it. So it just comes down to what do you believe?
Well, no,
and rather
because
than what's a fact,
the
right?
consensus of a scientific field makes a difference. It's like if you hire a plumber to come look at your sink and he says, I recommend blowing it up. and to get this clog out, and you bring in like another 10 plumbers, and they're all just like, no, I would just put a snake down the drain. I mean, at some point you have to look at it and say,
do you have any argument or evidence or article refuting intelligent design?
Wait a minute. The thing to me is that there's no need to refute something that hasn't been demonstrated. So, for example,
have you not read the articles? Read the book?
Please show me the mechanism, intelligent design, okay? There's a mechanism called evolution that can be demonstrated. We can actually breed.
Evolution is not a mechanism.
It is a mechanism. It has to do with breeding populations in order to produce specific phenotypic changes in those populations through reproduction. So you have
Evolution only explains what happens once you've got a self-replicating molecule.
That's fine. You're talking, and that's what you're discussing. You're talking about evolution. Saying what evolution describes is fine. That's what evolution describes. You asked me if I adhere to that. I'm saying yes, because I've seen the mechanism work. I know that it exists, right? That I've seen animals in population. I've seen populations change because of breeding data, like data that's transferred because of breeding, that ends up making a change to the population overall. And so I know that evolution exists. It can be demonstrated as a working mechanism that we understand completely. What I'm saying...
microevolution,
it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. The mechanism exists, and you're acknowledging it exists. Now, show me something that ever popped into existence without that just bang. It's where do you get the idea that intelligent design is making things change into things? Like, where are you getting that change?
Because the cell and the DNA molecule act like computer processors.
That is a metaphor.
That's not a mechanism. That is not a mechanism that you're demonstrating. Please demonstrate how intelligent design acts upon any biological organism to make it change into something else. Where have you ever seen that?
The changes occur based on the DNA code. It's not just a random change.
Right.
Yes, you're describing evolution.
That's correct.
No, that's not evolution. You can't just say it's evolution.
No, you said before that you agreed that that what I was describing was, quote, microevolution. It is those populations changing.
We're actually out of time. Feel free to call back and continue this with Matt another week, or with me if I'm on.
And as far as I know, there's not a debate list for Craig. I think that it's just about
not
PhDs.
Not currently. Oh, there was a question about whether Craig was like dodging Matt specifically.
And no, I'm not aware of anything like that.
He just has a general policy against. Okay, that's our show. Bye.
Calls, right? Wait, I think it's going to be... They're holding.
Okay.
Let's just do a couple. Come on.
We got more people.
They waited so
absolutely.
patiently.
Absolutely. We're sorry, Patrick in Minneapolis.
No worries.
But no, that list doesn't... It's just, as far as I know, Matt has said before that Craig only debates PhDs, and that's just something I've heard Matt kind of mention. I don't think there's any kind of a list, or if there is, I'm not aware of it.
And then Matt likes to follow up by saying, and William Lane Craig is afraid to debate me, but I'm pretty sure that he's always being tongue-in-cheek on purpose when he says that.
Yeah.
Well, I could understand him being afraid of him, but, and then, so do you know, is there actually, like, does he get paid when he does those debates?
William Lane Craig or Matt?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sure he does.
Oh, I'm sure William Lane Craig makes a killing.
I'd be surprised if he didn't.
Or he probably
I guess I'll
just
put it that
brings
way.
a stack of books along to sell.
Yeah.
One way or another, William Lane Craig is making a living at this, and that's kind of a difference between William Lane Craig and us. He makes a living at this. We're volunteers.
You guys will in time. I have confidence in that people will wise up. And they'll be all looking to you guys for information. But here's another quick question. I've heard the Founding Fathers, people deist and theist, or is it the other way around that people construe them as?
What?
Like the Founding Fathers, I've heard people say that they are deist, not deist.
Well,
or is that the other way around?
It depends on how you define them. But like a theist is anybody that believes in a God generally, but people separate out the deist as somebody who believes in a God that's completely uninvolved, that produced the universe and then is not involved. And a lot of people say that a lot of the Founding Fathers were deistic in that they believed in sort of a more amorphous kind of non-involved God.
Like, that's more of just believing in, like, the heaven aspect, maybe, right?
Just believing that something started the universe and who knows what, you know. But yeah,
Right
they
on.
call it God. Kind of that sort of that's the deist in a nutshell.
Cool. Well, thank you for taking my call, and
Sure.
and I definitely want to come down there and buy you guys some buckets of beers. I learned my jargon, pictures or wherever you guys go. So I'm really excited. That's
Thanks.
definitely on my bucket list. Have a great night and all that stuff.
Okay.
See ya.
Not Derek. Sarah in Oklahoma?
Hello.
Hi. You're going to be our last post-show caller today. What's up?
Oh, wow. I just have a couple questions. I'm actually an atheist, but there are some questions that people ask me that I have a tough time answering. So I wanted to kind of ask you guys, what are the consequences of being a Christian?
That is a ridiculously broad question.
Yeah,
I don't
it really
think
is.
I think the only way to answer that is to ask them, what do you mean by that?
I mean, people ask, like, why atheists try to get people to not be Christians anymore.
Oh, what's the harm.net, right?
Oh,
Yeah.
Is that the one? What's
Yeah.
the harm.net?
Well,
or
I actually have a
.com?
post at our blog, too, that you might have to poke around for. But if you look up the Atheist Experience blog, I did one that was called Wasting Your Life. And you might want to look that one up.
But I would also, yes, check out Tracie's post and also go to what'stheharm.net, which is a big indexed list of different superstitious beliefs. And basically, for each type of belief, it has a big list of actual things that happened that were really bad because of those beliefs.
I would also note something that I find interesting personally is that either you're devoting yourself a lot to this belief, in which case you are losing a lot of resource, time, money, your life, or you're saying that it's not that important to you. And what I find interesting is that the people who say that it's not that important to it seem to hang on to their religious beliefs like grim death. So they will say, well, I don't understand, it's not really, it's not a big deal to me, it just makes me feel better, and it's not a big part of my life. And it's like, well, gee, you sure hang on to it tightly for somebody who, you're refusing to let go of it, but it's not that important, right? I don't buy it.
Yeah, one of my biggest things actually is that it gives unwarranted authority to people who say that they have like the blessing of the supernatural creator, and all those priests molesting all those kids would not be able, I mean, their religion doesn't cause them to do that, but it does give them this kind of fake moral authority to be saying, how dare you stand there and accuse me of things? I'm a man of God and I shouldn't have to face your accusations.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess those are the main things that come to mind.
Okay, and another one is a lot of Christians say that evolution isn't a fact. And
Like that last guy?
Yeah.
I think the only thing you can really do is kind of educate yourself on evolution and bring yourself up to speed on the lines of evidence that have caused scientists to accept it. So I recommend, I personally think that Richard Dawkins has a well-deserved reputation as being really good at explaining evolution. So either The Blind Watchmaker, or if you're looking for something newer,
Actually, if you're looking for something
what's the newest one? What?
Greatest Show on Earth.
The Greatest Show on Earth, yes, Richard Dawkins.
Well, let me just say there's actually a video series with Richard Dawkins called something like, it's either Growing Up in the Universe, so if you Google it on YouTube, you'll find it. It's extremely old and dated, but he explains it on a level that children could understand it.
And the PBS special that you mentioned was really good.
Oh yeah, Nova, Intelligent
Yeah.
Design on Trial,
Yes.
Nova series, you can find it in pieces on YouTube.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for taking my call.
Sure, thank you for calling.
All right,
Bye.
thanks. We out of here?
I'm out, I think that's it.
Okay, for
Boom.
people who were asking about my shirt earlier, this is a Zergling. So
Aw.
it's a StarCraft geek reference.
I thought it was Toy Story.
No.